Dear children, good morning. I am Pradeep Bhattakur sir. I hope you liked the previous two sessions of your English class. Now, each one of you is a special person. Therefore, you will have to behave like a special person. The qualities of a special person are that he or she is hardworking and sincere. Therefore, being a special person, you should work hard and be sincere. Your life will become special. Now, in continuation of our English class on the chapter on Nelson Mandela from the first flight, today in our first session, we will start with the first paragraph of the last section, which reads as follows. In life, every man has twin obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children, and he has an obligation to his people, his community, his country. In a civil and humane society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of those obligations. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. I did not, in the beginning, choose to place my people above my family. But in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. In this paragraph, Mandela begins by talking of man's twin obligations in life. Twin obligations means two closely related duties or responsibilities. These twin or closely related duties or obligations are, on the one hand, obligations to one's family, to one's parents, and to one's wife and children, and on the other side, obligations to one's people, one's community, and one's country. Any mature and responsible person cannot think only of himself and his family. There will always be the awareness of one's duty towards the nation and its people. The well-being of the family is directly related to the well-being of the nation. Mandela has a deep realization of the fact that human life is all about interrelationships and interdependence. Mandela goes on to say that in a civil and humane society, meaning a respectful, polite, and compassionate or sympathetic society, each man or person is able to fulfill or perform those twin obligations or duties. And performance of these duties will depend on a person's inclinations or likings and abilities. This means that greater the inclinations or abilities, bigger and greater will be the tasks performed. But the situation in South Africa was different. The South African society, as far as the blacks were concerned, was neither civil nor humane. The government of the whites was following the policy of racial discrimination, and the black South Africans were treated disrespectfully and cruelly by the government. They were denied their basic rights and freedoms as human beings, about which we had discussed earlier. Therefore, Mandela says that it was almost impossible for a man of his birth and color to fulfill or perform those obligations. We all know it very well that Mandela was born as a black South African. And in South Africa, any person whose skin was black or brown and not white, and who attempted or tried to live as a human being, was punished and isolated or cut off from society, as if it were a crime not to have white skin, as if taking birth in the society of black or brown skinned people was a crime. Horrible situation, isn't it? Mandela says that in South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably or unavoidably ribbed or cut forcibly apart or away from his family. This is because fulfilling one's duty to one's people meant trying to ensure a life of dignity and equality for the blacks. It meant ensuring an oppression free life for the blacks. That would further mean fighting against the government by opposing the policy of apartheid or racial discrimination. The government would then come down heavily upon such a person. The government would try to arrest such a person, torture him, and put him in jail. To avoid such a situation, and also to save the family members from cruel treatment, such a person had to go underground or into hiding. He had to stay away from his family and home and was forced to live a life apart or live separately. Mandela uses the term twilight existence for such a life spent in secrecy and rebellion, because one could not live freely in society and openly revolt against the authority. Everything had to be done secretly. When Mandela says that in the beginning he did not choose to place his people above his family. What he means to say is that family came first for him and the people came second in terms of priority or importance. But what Mandela found out is that when he tried to serve or perform his duty to the people, he was prevented or he was not allowed to perform his duty towards his family members. That is when he decided to place the people above his family. He became aware of the problems faced by the common black people of South Africa. Then he thought of freeing his people from the racist regime or government. The next paragraph reads as follows: I was not born with hunger to be free. I was born free, free in every way that I could know, free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim, to roast, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. In this paragraph, Mandela talks of his childhood when he led a carefree life. His life as a child was free from anxiety or responsibility. Every child has that innate or inborn sense of freedom. Therefore, Mandela says that he was not born with a hunger to be free. He was already free. He was born free. He had no feeling of being in bondage. Mandela, as a child, was free to do all the things that children liked to do. He had freedom to run in the fields near his mother's hut. He was free to swim in the clear stream that ran through his village. He had the freedom to roast mealies or cook in an open fire his maize kernels under the stars. In South Africa, a maize plant is referred to as mealie. He also had the freedom to ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls. You might have seen people riding on the backs of buffaloes in the villages. He could freely do all these childhood activities so long as he did what he was told by his father or to do, told by his father to do, or he acted in agreement with the customs or traditions of his tribe. Mandela says in such a situation, he was not troubled by the laws made by the government or the laws made by God Himself. Now, the next paragraph. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me that I began to hunger for it. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself, the transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family. The freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. Here, Mandela tells us that he began to hunger or have a strong desire for freedom when he became a young man. As a young man, Mandela learned or he became aware of the fact that the freedom that he enjoyed in his boyhood was just an illusion, meaning that his boyhood freedom was not real. It only appeared to him to be real. Mandela, as a young man, discovered that his freedom had already been taken from him under the racist policy of the white government. He did not have the rights and freedoms of a white young man like him. As a student, Mandela's world was limited to himself. He did not then think of the freedom of all the black people. He wanted freedom only for himself. He wanted the freedom to stay out at night, the freedom to read what he pleased, and the freedom to go where he chose. Mandela calls these freedoms transitory because they were not permanent. Later on, they were taken away from him. He had to spend 27 years in prison when he revolted against the government, asking for the freedom of all black Africans. As a young man in Johannesburg, Mandela yearned or had a strong emotional desire for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving his potential, of earning his keep or livelihood, and of marrying and having a family. These freedoms are basic because they are essential in the life of every normal, worldly person. A person wants to achieve as much success as is possible in life by making full use of his potential or capacity for development. Every self respecting man would make every effort to stand on his own legs by earning his livelihood. And marriage and a family are essential for normal social life. These freedoms are honorable because by doing these activities, one earns respect and a position in society. But the white regime of South Africa obstructed or prevented the blacks from leading such a lawful life. The situation was very frustrating for the black people. The white government was as if sitting on top of a volcano on the point of explosion. This is all for now. Good day, students.